I would argue that in this era of the NBA, more than any other before it, the word legacy is used more often than ever, considered and debated by fans more often than ever, and is cared about by the players themselves more than it ever has been. And maybe it's just because having a generational, legitimate greatest player of all time candidate in LeBron has sparked those types of conversations more than ever. Or how championship chasing, whether it be by an aging vet or an in their prime star, has become so common, or simply the increased awareness of the career arcs of players that has been brought about by the increasing use of social media. Whatever the reason, this legacy debate obviously impacts some players more than others. And for this season specifically, I think there are a handful of guys that are in the midst of especially significant seasons in terms of what they mean for their careers. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that their memories within the history of the NBA will forever be tarnished if they don't succeed in a certain way this season. But just given the climate of the league now with such a wide open championship chase, this is where a few guys could really start to separate themselves from the pack. You can make the case that the circumstances that built the KD era Warriors, the bargain Steph extension and the salary cap spike of 2016 that allowed them to bring in Durant in the first place, were a bit fluky and lucky, which gives certain players an excuse or a pass on why they didn't win a championship over the last few seasons. Not many teams even really attempted to be all that good over the last few years because they recognized how unbeatable that team was at full strength. And so they played the long game to get to this new era of the league in which there is a bit more parity at the top. And that is where the majority of these legacy cases start and finish on this list: postseason success. Historically, that's the biggest separator among comparably talented players throughout the years and years of NBA history. If you've won a championship, and if so, how many? And an opportunity is now present that hasn't been very attainable in a while, and which players take advantage of it and which don't could have a huge impact on the long-lasting legacies of some of the stars of this era, making this an enormous legacy year in the NBA. First up on the list is going to be Kawhi Leonard. And I want to emphasize here that when I say that his legacy is on the line, that doesn't necessarily mean that I think that everything's going to fall apart for him if the Clippers don't succeed in the postseason this year, but more so I think he could take a legitimately huge leap in NBA history in terms of all-time rankings if he manages to bring a title to the Clippers this year. Because there's the significance of bringing a title to the Clippers of all teams, a team that's never made the finals, a team that historically has been one of the worst franchises in the league, and then going there, obviously along with some help, and bringing a title to that kind of franchise gives so much credence to his resume that already has a ton of accomplishments. On top of that, getting 3 titles with 3 different teams and being the best guy on each of those teams, although you can make an argument that he wasn't the best player in San Antonio, but still, having that on his resume as well would make him a truly unique player across NBA history, unless LeBron ends up getting a championship in LA as well, because then he would join them with 3 championships on 3 different teams. And so for a player like Kawhi that we really don't talk a ton about in terms of his legacy, because his personality just doesn't really make us think that he cares all that much about that stuff, he has a chance to be a huge deal in NBA history by being the guy that not only brought the Clippers a title, but also won a championship in 3 different cities, again, unless LeBron ends up doing. And one last point here, if he did end up winning a championship with the Clippers this year and got back-to-back titles on 2 different teams as the best player on both of those teams, that would be another insane accomplishment as well. Second on the list now is someone that you know we had to get to at some point in this video, and it's LeBron James. And of course, this is a huge season for his legacy, as is every single season. And you can say what you want about how he's jumped around to different teams and how he's had this all-star cast of players, but if he ends up winning a championship with the Lakers this season, all it does is continue to give people that think he's the greatest player of all time more ammunition, and makes it that much more difficult for people to say that Michael Jordan is still better than him from a legacy standpoint. And so of course that kind of success for him this season would reopen up the greatest of all time debate that has kind of been put to rest for a little bit because he struggled last season. But again, if he gets to 4 championships, that gets a lot closer to MJ's 6. You can talk about his finals record if you want to. Winning a title with 3 different teams under different circumstances, you can give him as much credit or as little credit as you want to, but regardless, I think it's pretty clear that if LeBron ends up winning a championship with the Lakers this season, that conversation is going to have to be revisited. And again, it's going to be more difficult for people to continue to refute his claim as potentially the greatest player that the NBA has ever seen. Moving on now to another player you probably expected to see on this list, and that is James Harden. And we continue to hear this narrative about this guy that he is just, a scoring machine. He's just a stats guy, doesn't show up in the postseason. And I really feel like we're getting to the end of his and the Rockets' legitimate championship window. And you could honestly argue that this might be the last year that they're going to be a real championship threat, because at some point this guy has to slow down, right? Like, he can't just continue to be a 38 points per game scorer for the next couple of seasons. He did just hit 30 years old. Presumably Russell Westbrook will continue to get worse as well, and there's not a ton of high upside players on this roster that would make you think that this championship window is going to be open for very much longer. So in terms of his legacy specifically, if he wants to be known as anything other than that guy that scored a ton of points, shot a ton of free throws, and didn't show up in the postseason, he has to win a championship this season or next, but ideally this year with this roster. And you can think that that narrative is fair or not. I'm not here to argue whether or not that legacy for him is something that is true or not, but it's something that people definitely say and will continue to say until he has postseason success. And so this year is a huge year for him. Number 4 now is a player that maybe you didn't expect to see on here, and it's Giannis Antetokounmpo. And the reason for this is we're all still kind of in the honeymoon stage with Giannis, right? Like, he won the MVP last year. He's one of the best players in the league. Didn't have the kind of postseason success that he hoped that he would last year. Didn't make the conference finals. But if they don't have postseason success again this year, then questions are going to start to arise, fair or not, about why that's the case. This is a team that's been the most successful regular season team both last year and presumably this year as well, assuming that they can continue playing the way that they have. So from a regular season record standpoint, you can't really take away a lot from his last year and a half, obviously winning the MVP last year as well. But suddenly questions are going to come up about whether this guy is a big-time postseason performer, whether he has what it takes to win a championship, all the stuff that comes up about a player that takes longer than 6 seasons to win their first championship, but also wants to be considered one of the best players in the entire league. So this one is, it's for me definitely too soon to start saying these kinds of things about Giannis if they don't win a championship this season. But if it goes so poorly that they don't even make the conference finals again, people are going to start having some pretty tough conversations about Giannis, and that would be really unfortunate for him. Number 5 now is James Harden's teammate, Russell Westbrook. And again, it's going to be a similar story. This is a guy that just doesn't really typically perform well in the postseason. He's a regular season statistic machine, but that's going to be his legacy until he ends up winning a championship. I'm not going to spend too much time on him because a lot of the story is the same for him as it was for Harden. And if he doesn't end up stepping up and they don't end up playing well in the postseason, then he's going to be remembered as the triple-double guy and not much else, which is still a historic thing, right? Like what he's done statistically, and he'll be compared to Oscar Robertson for a long time. But we really don't talk about Oscar Robertson all that much unless we're talking about Russell Westbrook. So if he wants to be known as someone more than just that, postseason success has to come for him this season. And last up now, and probably the most interesting one for me on this list, is Anthony Davis. And this doesn't really have a whole lot to do with the championship part, although that certainly would help his legacy, get that monkey off his back of just having a championship in his career. But I also think that it's possible, depending on how this Lakers season shakes out, and they get, let's just say they get to the finals and Anthony Davis is just a monster in the finals, I think we're going to start talking about this guy as the best player in the league. Like, we've kind of flip-flopped around this because it was LeBron for the longest time, and then KD took it for a little bit, and then Kawhi won the championship, and now everybody's saying it's him, and now KD's hurt. Giannis is up there for a lot of people. But if the Lakers, win the finals or get to the finals and Anthony Davis is a machine, people are going to start saying that he is the best player in the league. And that is a huge title to have. Like, not many players throughout the history of the league have been able to say that at one point in time, they were the best basketball player on the planet. And I think that would be huge for his legacy, in addition to obviously winning a championship. But you cannot discount how big of a deal it would be if we get to the end of this year and we're like, man, Anthony Davis, that dude is the best basketball player in the entire world. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Really quickly before the video ends, I just want to thank you guys so much for the support on the videos recently. I've been putting out a video every single day of December for the entire month, and the support that you guys continue to give me on every video, whether it's views, likes, comments, shout outs on Twitter, whatever it is, man, like, I truly appreciate it, and I can't thank you guys enough for all that support. It really does mean the world to me. But like I said, that's going to be the end of today's video. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.